Hello, and welcome to another fully live episode of Hacking with Friends with myself and Kody KIlian, in which we tell you about the hacking news of the week and talk about some cool hacking tools you might have found along the way. KIlian, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to make it. It's funny here. I was telling you as we were trying to get set up, this is now the second web event I've done this week where the host I've been on with, or the co-host, had technical issues where the computer crashed literally as the event was starting. So I must bring that, I really don't want to work this week vibe to this proceedings that bosses don't like.
Yeah, well, this is going to be our final stream until I go to tour camp next week. So I was just like, man, I got to make it work. Because normally I fought with this computer so many times. I'm just ready to, at a certain point, call it good and just take it to the Apple Store and let it live its next life. But every time I do that, these stickers get peeled off and they end up like replacing the whole, like everything on the computer, and I get it back and it's brand new. So I like these stickers. I wanted to fight for today. And also, we've got a lot of news to cover today. So I wanted to make sure we got online. So thank you to everyone for being flexible with our hacker schedule. I have had this troublesome computer for about a year now, and we've watched it die on the stream twice, I think, so far. And it's been brought back from the brink. So it's kind of a tradition at this point to just like cheer this computer on throughout the stream and hope that it actually makes it through.
I was gonna say, is this like the Jason Voorhees of like laptops here, where it dies? Take it to tour camp, throw it in the lake. It's gonna come back and terrorize you, in the cabins. Then we're going full horror movie.
I don't want to jinx it, but this computer has been through so much, and its replacement is like super locked down, and it actually also cannot do the stream because of forced updates, and it'll just restart itself, and I have no ability to prevent that.
Sure.
So this is currently the champion. We'll see how long it goes for. But yeah, we've got a lot going on this week. And KIlian, what have you been working on this week? Anything cool? Anything interesting come up?
For me, primarily work content. I think I have 3 or 4 videos that are in my queue from this week. If anybody's following like the main Verona sort of stuff, we have a brand new what's new, and this past month, a lot of cool stuff has come out. So we have some content there I'll be on, and some other internal content. Like I said, a lot of cool Verona specific type of stuff. So if we have Verona folks here, you're probably tired of seeing me after this week.
Man, and I know. I also want to lightly bully our incident of the month people. I really want to have that again this month, and it's so much fun, but I haven't heard back them. So if you're an incident of the month person, please contact me because we would like to have that stream. But yeah, I have been working on some ping pong ball LED walls, some LoRa stuff, and then also getting set up on some more cloud content. We have some really smart researchers here at Varonis who are teaching me stuff every day. So I got the opportunity to read through and contribute a bit on an article talking about remote management software. So it was a case study kind of talking about how our researchers found that hackers were really trying to use these remote management tools to steal information because they're typically already installed for IT support and stuff like that. So if somebody takes over one of them and does something nefarious, it's a lot less likely they're going to be caught. And most of the powerful features that they need are already baked in. So living off the land and talking about abusing remote management features was kind of what I was focused on this week. And of course, getting ready for tour camp. And I'm also helping my friend Angelina make a Nullbyte video. So we talked about how Nullbyte is kind of tentatively going to have some new episodes. I'm still thinking of how to break the awkward silence of like 3 years of me not posting. I've got some pretty good ideas so far. So if you contributed ideas last time, I was listening, and I think that we'll have some good ones. But her episode is on spoofing drones. So it's really cool. All right. Do I have one of them? Oh, yeah. So using one of our little open source tools, this is a ESP8266 based microcontroller breakout board. We flashed a very popular project over that allows you to spoof a bunch of drones in the air. So what that means is anybody using the new like federal standard drone ID or open drone ID, if you have a drone, it's supposed to be broadcasting this, and it's supposed to tell you where a nearby drone is. Well, there's this program that allows you to just kind of flash it to one of these devices, and then boom, it creates like 20 or more fake drones that are swarming around. And according to like a smartphone running open drone ID or somebody monitoring that protocol for safety, it suddenly looks like there's a bunch of drones all over the place, which is crazy. So there's a couple hiccups in our first experiment. We found that by default, this makes all the drones appear in China. So like, you know, your phone will pick them up and be like, hey, there's a drone launch near you. And then it'll be like, but it's not that near you. It's like, you know, thousands of miles away. So there's a couple things we had to do. You can also, for example, add a GPS to give it live data and then make it so that it's creating a kind of like cloaking swarm of drones in a specific area. And our final video, which we're going to be, I think, filming later today, is actually going to be a test of dangling a bunch of these microcontrollers underneath the drone to create a huge fake swarm that basically masks the movement of a drone from being detected by this system, or at least accurately cataloged. So Angelina has experience as a pilot, which is really cool. So she knows all about ADS-B and other airplane specific protocols. And this is something that kind of takes off of ADS-B. It has a lot of things in common with it. And she's going to be demonstrating how easy that is to abuse. I have to also say that this is our probably most likely to get us in trouble null byte episode we've maybe ever did. So we got to be really careful because if you were to take this one to an airport and make a giant swarm of drones suddenly appear at the airport, you would probably go to jail. So often I'm like, yeah, like, you know, I'm teaching Wi-Fi hacking. If you hack your neighbor, you know, you might get in trouble. The likelihood of getting caught on that one anyway is like relatively low in most cases. However, the likelihood of getting caught in the airplane spoof or the drone spoofing one is like 100%. So I'm struggling a little bit with how we're going to soften this one, but you can look forward to another potentially very spicy null byte video if they actually let us publish this one. So it should be pretty cool. Let's see. So we also had some questions in the chat. Want to acknowledge you. Does it do that by attenuating the RSSI, the received signal strength? And what this is actually doing is the new open drone standard, the drone ID standard. I should let Angelina talk about it mostly, but I can give you the high level. It uses commercial like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth beacons to advertise the position of a drone. So that means if you have a smartphone, you can pick up those signals. And that was kind of a deliberate choice because they wanted people to be able to detect these things without having to get any special equipment, right? So if you have just a regular smartphone, then you can theoretically receive these signals, and that makes it more useful for the average person. But that also means we can spoof it and hack it as well. So the ESP8266 is really famous for being able to send arbitrary packets, and that means that we can format those packets to look like a drone. And in fact, if you were to open up your phone and look at the available Wi-Fi networks, you would actually see the drone advertised as a network, but as a really super long string. So that's how we're doing it. We're basically the exact same way that my previous drone swarmer worked by faking Wi-Fi networks. This does the same thing with drones. That's it. And you can do the same thing with Bluetooth, but because the microcontroller we are working with doesn't support Bluetooth, I just kept it to Wi-Fi on this particular example. But it's really cool, and you can look forward to that episode coming out in the next hopefully in the next month. I guess we'll see how quick the new turnaround cycle is. But yeah, so if you're interested in drone hacking, we covered this on the stream a while ago, and now we're starting to try to max it out, you know, and see how many fake drones we can actually create. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be really cool. All right, so let's talk about drones. So there is a proposed DJI ban, which has been snuck into like a defense funding bill. And this is a really interesting debate. So obviously having like a flying, you know, thing that possibly reports back to servers in China, maybe being flown over sensitive installations, like it's basically got all the sensors in it necessary for war driving and locating both cellular signals and Wi-Fi signals, as well as probably Bluetooth signals. So that means that like I guess the US government is looking at this like, okay, the Chinese government is able to potentially access this data. They're probably also able to filter for like interesting locations because these things are enabled with GPS. And then they could potentially go over sensor data there that reveals the location of something that's maybe out of date or vulnerable that would be easy to target like in a more like specific manner. So this kind of like phishing expedition is something that is a big concern because like there's often these companies like Kaspersky has been accused of in the past that have the ability to rifle around and potentially search every let's just say search things that might be sensitive. In Kaspersky's case, it was like the ability to be an antivirus and search someone's whole computer and maybe flag an interesting result to the Russian government. In this case, it's like, okay, maybe they're flying around, they find something interesting and they flag it to the Chinese government. However, there is also the free market. So if you like drones, you know that DJI is pretty much the best in drones. Like there isn't really an American company that can touch them in terms of quality and price. They just have so many things built in. It's such a connected system that has a lot of really nice features. And they've complied with the US government to build in all these privacy and whatever features that are necessary to fly in our airspace. So the argument by this article is basically that like the US government told DJI that they needed to do all these things to make sure that they were flying safely. Some of those things let me include obeying maps that are very complicated for where they can and can't fly. Like there's sporting events and other things where I've tried to fly my drone in my backyard basically, but because a sporting event is happening nearby or because there's a low flying aircraft, I literally cannot launch my drone. And that requires a complex network of communication in order to make sure that those drones can follow those restrictions. So in order to obey no-fly law zones or able to make sure that people aren't doing things they're not supposed to do with these drones, they've had to basically cram in a lot of technology that now the US government is accusing them of potentially abusing. So this is an impossible task. It sounds like for DJI, they're being asked to basically comply with all these laws that require them to have this technology on board. But then the US government is freaking out about the fact that all this technology is now on board and flying around overhead. So obviously there's probably some like, maybe like some precedents here of like them forcing a Chinese company out of the market or forcing them to sell in order to continue to stay in the market. And that is of course TikTok. So the fact that we're seeing another Chinese company kind of targeted in this way is really interesting, especially because the penetration in the market here for DJI products is crazy. Cinematographers use it. It's really going to wreck some very, very expensive like setups if DJI drones are no longer able to fly in the United States. Now, presumably this would be like a ban that goes like forward. So it would be like new products wouldn't be allowed in, but that wouldn't really exactly solve the stated problem here. So I'm really interested to see how this one turns out, because as another fight between the United States and a Chinese company is gearing up, DJI is kind of an unlikely candidate just because of how much people genuinely love their products and how prevalent they are in the US market.
Yeah, definitely an interesting one. I know, Kody, you and I both got drones at one time, and then I promptly destroyed mine. But I get sort of the initial rationale from it is like, yeah, you don't want people flying drones in dangerous ways, or or over a sporting event or in some other dangerous thing. So it makes sense to have some of the restrictions. But on the flip side, you're right. It's kind of, they basically laid a trap for them. They walk right into it. Like, hey, you need internet connectivity on all of these drones to follow regulations. Like, whoop, gotcha. Now it's sending data all these places that you might not anticipate or expect. And I don't know what the loophole would be around it. If we look at like the TikTok parallel, they run their US operations in the US, or, I don't know what goes on the company, but theoretically the data shouldn't be ever going back. I don't know what DJI does for that, if they have US operations where it would go to for that authorization and tracking. That doesn't go back, but who knows? It's an interesting conundrum.
It's kind of it's like a happy accident where they're like, this Chinese company is like, oops, like, we happen to have access to, all this like radio information. Like, what could we do with that? But, they literally were pushed there by like regulators. And like, now that they have to do this, it's like kind of like a happy accident for the Chinese government to be like, oh, wow, like, okay, like that's a lot of useful data. And you better believe if, the United States had access to all that kind of data in another country they were super interested in, we would be the first ones to be combing through that data and like, getting some sort of secret court order to get it. So like, it makes sense that like, that's the way we do business. We assume that's the way they do business. Like, and these things are going to continue to come up. So keep an eye on this one. It's going to be a precedent for other companies. And this isn't even the only foreign company that we're talking about the United States banning in this episode. So we've got the TikTok thing still going on, and now DJI possibly getting thrown into the mix. All in all, a very crazy turn of events for foreign companies that have significant market penetration in the United States, but might represent a national security threat, according to some people in the Senate or Congress. All right, so next story we have up. Yes, my computer has hard crashed, and now I must reload everything. So we talked about Scattered Spider back, I think, when we were talking about the casino hacks, right? Like that was one of the last times we talked about like a really big deal with them, because they were involved in like initial access, I believe, right? or am I mixing them up?
Were we talking about? We were talking about the guy, the threat actor on the breach forum named Spider, right? Which I think is a different guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't.
Yes.
These names are
everybody's a Spider. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a
like
different guy.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember like when these people struck last, but basically, we saw a kind of shift towards attacking cloud apps for data theft, and this is, again, I really appreciate the fact that we have gone to Midjourney now instead of the same stock photos over and over. Like, this is great. So this is software as a service applications that are presenting juicy targets, and we've often covered this on some of our like threat research, like when we talk about incident of the month. So like we're often talking about cloud applications, and yeah, there are a lot of people who can gain access to initial accounts and then use these software as a service applications to exfiltrate tons of information, and this is very, very profitable for ransomware gangs. It doesn't even need to all be under the same organization. Frequently, one group will be specialized in like SIM swapping or phishing, and then another group will be an actual ransomware affiliate and come in and take over from a certain point, because it doesn't make sense for the first group to expose themselves to any further risk, or maybe they're just specialized in what they do. So these attacks on software as a service applications are accelerating, and that's why if you've seen like an uptick in, I don't know, phishing attacks or like people trying to get into your work accounts, it really is an increased goal of these groups to try to get after these SaaS applications, and especially, you know, gaining Okta permissions to get into a bunch of other apps, being able to go through information that's maybe exposed to people who have an elevated role in within like a software as a service application. That's really where we're seeing a lot of these breaches we're going to talk about this week, actually, is an employee or somebody getting phished or downloading something they shouldn't have, and then, you know, it's not that employee's account necessarily that's interesting. It's the access they have and potentially gaining access to a larger environment.
The thing that I'll note about this particular article is, well, twofold. One, it talks about how they're using the stolen credentials to then leverage your SSO app, like your Okta or something like that, to pivot to different data stores. Last year, I did a presentation at Gartner where I walked through an entire threat kind of attack vector where we did exactly that. So it's funny and a little bit prophetic, I guess, to see that, you know, a lot of people in the security industry saw this coming, and now it's almost commonplace. You know, we're seeing it so often, it's been commoditized by these threat groups. The other funny thing too, that's more current to this year, is I believe that article also mentioned that when they compromise the user's account, they use something called Microsoft Delve to start to search for sensitive data in the organization's data stores. When I talk about that all the time in the context of Copilot. Copilot is sort of like the smart AI version of Delve, which surfaces all of these potential risks because data is overexposed in the organization. So I thought that was interesting and funny that attackers have now commoditized productivity tools for malicious purposes, and we've been warning about this for years now. So here we are.
It seems like a boring topic, but once you get to it just being in almost every news article, it starts to become something that everyone's talking about. All right, so this is, I guess, not too surprising for me, just because I've been party to this controversy for a while now. I believe, and again, this is me like trying to remember a news article from like years ago. I believe that Kaspersky was implicated or somehow suspected in the discovery of some highly sensitive like cyber tools that the US government had developed. And because, you know, this antivirus had access to just scan everything, it's alleged, I believe, that the Russian government was able to detect the existence of those files and then exfiltrate them somehow. So that is obviously a big deal. Like if you have something that is trusted to defend your computer and has almost universal access to all the files on it, that means that it can potentially discover stuff it's not supposed to. And if it can exfiltrate that information too, then that is a very, very big deal. So this was banned for use in the US government and by like people working for the US government for a while now. But it looks like the Biden administration is now just saying like, nope, we're done with that. Like it is now beyond a shadow of a doubt. This is something that is a threat, not just to the US government, but to like Americans in terms of data exfiltration. So coming across a computer running Kaspersky antivirus apparently is enough of a threat in their opinion that it is now banned software. That is crazy to me. So this ban involves the sale of Kaspersky products, but also prevents the company from delivering antivirus and security updates to customers, making it critical for customers to provide alternative software find alternative software by the end of September. That's not a lot of time.
Soon.
I remember a time when I thought Kaspersky was the best antivirus, and I ran it myself on my computer.
It was good.
Yeah, it was so much better, I feel like, than some of the other alternatives like out there for a while. And like, it's funny to me that this company that I do remember, like giving full access to my computer is now being identified as a threat to national security. So seeing another foreign company being targeted by the US government, we're again talking about the exact same thing. Like we have a product that by its nature has access to sensitive stuff and a government which is potentially very interested in that sensitive stuff. With like literally one example of that actually happening, that worst fear happening, I think that's all it really takes for this company to just get kind of kicked out of the United States and banned. Now, having subsidiaries or other sorts of, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Sorry. The Equation Group, which is believed to have been the NSA's cyber operations division. Yeah. So, they got all mixed up in that. This is again like pretty startling. Like we don't see this very often, that like a software company just gets like banned, especially one with a global presence. But this is happening with increased frequency as these national security conversations come up, and people in the United States anywhere are getting more hawkish about banning companies even with significant market penetration in the United States. I want to see this dedicated page. Yeah, we're living in the age of prohibition again. Like people are going to be bootlegging Kaspersky antivirus updates to their grandparents who refuse to switch.
I mean, if we're going to do it, let's start meeting in alleys with like paper bags full of floppy disks to share our Kaspersky updates. Yeah,
this is pretty serious. I just wanted to point this out as we're talking about some pretty big bans here that are going through. We've got TikTok, we've got DJI, we've got Kaspersky. I'm interested to see if any other nationally competing brands that could potentially serve a security risk end up getting banned, because Kaspersky, like if that incident is confirmed, then that's a pretty open and shut case for like maybe why we don't want them like rummaging through like the entire population's like computers. Somebody's going to make a mistake eventually and leave a confidential something, and that's just too big of a dragnet, I think, for like most people in the government to be comfortable with. But if it's someone who's competing with US businesses and we want to give our own businesses a tactical advantage, then it certainly would begin to be convenient to start just saying anybody who's got too much market penetration, that's doing too well from a country that we don't like, maybe doesn't get to stay in our market. I'm curious to see if that's the trend, or if these are all such legitimate security threats that we're just realizing at this moment. And the fact that the US based competitors of these businesses do the exact same things and worse doesn't concern us when they're also coupled with massive data breaches. Interesting. Anyway, moving on. All right, so let's go into some of the major vulnerabilities this week. So this is a cosmic string flaw impacting 75% of Adobe e-commerce and Magneto sites. So if you know about e-commerce, you know that a lot of like rather large brands use these backends. And this is also something that is not getting patched. A patch is available, and yet there are a significant number of sites that are still up and vulnerable, and this appears to be actively exploited. So this is a very critical vulnerability, especially when paired with another recent vulnerability that can be chained to basically take over and maybe even get into other accounts. So something that you're definitely going to want to fix now. It's something we'll probably also be seeing in the news when we talk about people who may have had infrastructure potentially breached by this 0-day. We've got one other actively exploited 0-day in this report, but yeah, interesting to see it affect so many e-commerce sites, because we typically don't see them targeted as often, or at least we haven't seen them for, I don't know, a couple months. That's rare by our standards. All right.
James, quick comment to that. James says, I think third-party antivirus on Windows are dead. There's a fair argument to be made there, I think. Because, I mean, at least in the corporate world, think about how many people are probably running Windows Defender. It's not the worst. Oftentimes you get it paired with something like CrowdStrike as an example for more, advanced EDR type of stuff like that. But yeah, the traditional antivirus type of thing, not faring super well in today's climate.
Yeah. Yeah, it does seem like there's been a shift away from that. And I mean, that could also be just they're assuming that now most of these risks are mitigated in the operating system, and thus it's not as essential as it used to be.
Yeah,
right,
with the memory protection and stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to talk about an inspiring story of quick recovery.
Ooh, okay.
Well, it's got a twist. So we talked about, I believe, about CDK last week. This was a car. It's basically like a car sales backend that lots and lots of dealers use. And they were talking about like all this downtime, having to do pen and paper. Well, they got back up on their feet, only to immediately get breached again Wednesday night as they were starting to restore systems from the previous cyber attack. So it's really hard to know what the right balance between like, stopping the bleeding, especially when so many smaller businesses are really like impacted by this. It looks like so many dealerships were relying on this technology, and having it be down was probably, again, costing them a lot of money. So they went live, and it turns out that they had not fully cleared the system, or there was some other credential that had been breached. It's not really clear what happened at this moment, but that's kind of typically what happens if you get set up too quickly and then find that actually the attackers have not been cleared out of the system, or there's still a backdoor, or there's still something vulnerable that's allowing them to get back in. This is going to be something that's quite expensive, again, because so many this is a supply chain attack, basically. So many smaller businesses rely on this vendor that it's shutting a lot of them down and causing a lot of pressure on them. So we'll see what happens here. But it seems like the attackers in this case are very persistent, and it looks now like they are going to be committing to being down for at least another couple of days, and they're not going to try to rush the next infrastructure restart because it looks like that was possibly a bad idea. Just my opinion. All right, next up, we have Crown Equipment confirming a cyber attack which disrupted their manufacturing. This is forklifts, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I was looking at it and it's just like, what is a lift truck? But I understand now that is in fact just a fancy name for a forklift. It makes sense. Since around June 8th, employees have been reporting the company was breached, and basically all the IT systems were shut down. There was also a lot of uncertainty around like how they were going to get paid or when they were going to get paid. Frequently when we have these sorts of internal IT attacks, it disrupts a business's ability to know like who works for them and like how to pay them. And that is, certainly, even if their forward-facing operations are okay, it means that their back-end stuff could be in a lot of trouble. So when we hear like employees are reporting like, I don't know when I'm going to get my next paycheck or something like that, like that is often a very, not great position for a company to be in. And these ransomware groups are always looking to exert maximum pressure. So if they're not able to completely shut down a company, then exerting pressure with something like this is pretty much the next step in trying to force ransomware negotiations. Now, we're also going to cover a company that actually paid the negotiation to try to prevent their it was their employees' data from being leaked. But again, there's no guarantee that it's not being sold privately. And there's also no guarantee that if that threat actor needs money in the future, they don't just go back and rummage through this data breach and then sell it online.
Yeah, there's plenty of instances where we've seen that. I mean, we won't spoil the story, but they're cyber criminals. The key part is criminal. Like, what do you think you're getting out of it?
Yeah. So just looking through the story, it sounds like an HR nightmare. It really sounds like they're going to be spending a lot of time internally making sure that their employees are taken care of because that's where it seems like the majority of the impact of this attack has been.
The other interesting thing about this article before we move on from it is just the thing that struck me about it is the level of confusion in communications, which I don't think is the best look. Because I think it was in the article. They're like, oh, well, yeah, we don't know what's going on. You guys have to take PTO while we're down. We're not paying you. And then they're like, well, it's actually a cyber attack. The change in communications, I don't think helped the situation. It certainly didn't help with employee relations if they're like, oh, well, you get forced time off. LOL. Because we're good.
Yeah. Well, I think that the new reporting requirements for like publicly traded companies to come forward within a certain amount of time and like disclose information about a breach, like I think that's a really, really important law. Like I think that the reason that we did that is because people were being so inconsistent, and everybody involved in the breach was just getting taken along for a ride and being made more easy victims by not being aware of what was happening.
Right.
That's really what our goal in I guess the government's goal in like making that rule was. I wish that more companies would learn that lesson, that like transparency and like making sure that people are aware of what's happening from the beginning is really, really important for people's ability to like plan their lives or know what's happening the next day. So yeah, that's like a very, very frustrating turn of events, but obviously like could be handled with a little bit more grace potentially. Although again, we see all sorts of companies get hit with this, and especially like privately owned companies, they just do whatever. Like, I don't know if you remember, like we covered a trucking company that was just like, message us on Twitter. We'll tell you where your truck is. Just like, are you sure? Like, is that the best way for them to reach out to you? Like, you know, do they need to be like a verified account, or like, what's your security protocol here? But it certainly spawned like a fertile ground for like phishing attacks and like all these other things to potentially impact the victims even further. So yeah, I think that like reporting requirements and some of these other more standardized approaches to these like certainly cut down on the chaos, and like it would definitely help probably them to know how they're paying their employees and making sure their employees know that too.
Oh, Funky Monk said Crown and the Heister have GPS and tracking on them. Next project, lift truck spoofing, if we want to be fancy about it.
create a fleet of virtual forklifts.
Yes.
That sounds kind of nice. Yeah, that sounds kind of nice. All right, so we have an update on the Advanced Auto Parts breach. This was part of our talking about the Snowflake data breaches. Again, this whole chain of breaches appear to be going after businesses that had environments that were not enabled with MFA and not part of like a supply chain attack, as was originally suspected. But still, a lot of companies swept up in this breach. This breach has been clarified that they attempted to sell the stolen data on a hacking forum this month. And that information, this was Spider on a forum, was trying to sell 3 terabytes of data. And this was customer profiles, loyalty gas card numbers with customer details, free gas, I guess. A bunch of employee information, auto parts and part numbers, sales history, employment candidates information. Oh yeah, so basically anybody who had applied to work at Advanced Auto Parts, their driver's license information, demographic details, transaction tender details. That's crazy. And then 200 tables of data. Price is 1.5 million, which is exceptionally high for like a data breach. Like we typically see this data being sold multiple times. So like selling it exclusively to anyone for 1.5 mil is kind of crazy to me anyway. Like, but who knows? Like maybe this is like, I mean, maybe the free gas you could get from this alone would make that worth it. I don't really know. But this is, you know, a lot of data. And it appears that they have filled out the 8K filing, which again is my favorite new law that people have to do, because otherwise you would never see this information in a timely manner. Like the track record of companies talking about the internal details of these breaches was usually on the scope of years, like a year or two later, maybe 3 years, we would find out that something really bad happened. So I love these. Like, I mean, you know, they might not be the prettiest, but they certainly contain relevant information, and I'm happy to see them. So sample information was leaked and confirmed employees' full names and email addresses, and that is not good. So in general, you know, when this sort of thing happens, employees don't have a lot of options. However, there is something that's a little cause for celebration, and that is free credit monitoring. It is so long. You can tell we've been covering a lot of different people getting free credit monitoring lately.
Right.
And I still caught up by that. And it doesn't really do a lot. Once you layer on your 6th free credit monitoring, you know, you can only watch your credit so hard before, like, you know, people like using that stolen data becomes like a big nuisance anyway. And you're beyond monitoring, you're now just in remediation. So it's no secret that Kilian and I don't really think much of, you know, your 7th or 8th round of free credit monitoring. It's not like it gets better with multiple levels. It's not like an actual shield. So, you know, we talk about how this 8K filing, is that it? Yes. How that is something that's improving people's ability to know what is out there about them, like what was involved in the breach, like,
Right.
and know it
Mhm.
earlier. So having some sort of, I don't know, compensation or some sort of like way of reducing that person's likelihood of actually, being taken advantage of because of that data. Like at a certain point, you can only give out free credit monitoring. And I feel like this is like the thoughts and prayers of our time when it comes
Right.
to like cybersecurity incident responses. Like at a certain point, like if we give companies in the United States a free license to just have as much data as they want about people and then breach it and then pay Experian like a little bit for free credit monitoring, like that,
Mhm.
while stimulating the credit industry, doesn't necessarily do consumers any good. And I think that there's going to be a tipping point where there's so much damage being done from these breaches that eventually it's not worth it anymore.
Yeah. Until the credit monitoring agency gets breached, like we've never seen that happen before.
Oh yeah. Like
Mhm.
the time that I had my information breached from a credit monitoring bureau, and then they offered me a free product for 3 years, which transitioned
Right.
into a paid subscription. Oh, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, how did I
Mhm.
become a lead for you? All right. So
Anyway,
let's see. So we've got a case of some security researchers doing some free research
you're
and
right.
then refusing to give back the money. So admittedly, this is what I would consider to be fictitious money or, cryptozoology money. But apparently some researchers, and I'm using kind of air quotes for researchers,
Researchers.
were able to divert a significant amount of money
Mhm.
into their own accounts. And at that point, the bug was fixed, and the people who fixed it reached out to the researchers who said they wanted a call with the sales team. Otherwise, they wouldn't give back the money. I don't know. I don't know what I would do in that situation, honestly. If I was just like, do I want the sales team to just have this like super weird call and maybe get like $1
Right.
million back? Like, I don't know. But I think that at this point, they're just like, no, that sounds weird. We're just going to call the cops. And that is where
Right.
we are at now. So we often talk about like, how do you disclose, a bug in a way that doesn't get people to call the FBI? This is case
No.
case study of how not to do that. So
No.
let's say you find a bug in a crypto protocol and you think the best way to show it off is to steal $3 million.
Right.
If the company reaches out and contacts you about that withdrawal, maybe you should at that point be very flexible about like how to
Right.
resolve the situation, because you probably crossed the line there. So a lot of people I think would agree that that is in fact not white hat hacking. It is
No.
extortion. And then they're also not disclosing the identity of the researchers because they, quote, don't deserve recognition for their actions. That's honestly kind of funny. So
Yeah.
if you were a researcher and you were looking to break into the industry and you are one of the beg forgiveness rather than ask permission kind of types, that might not be the look when it comes
Mhm.
to
No.
especially like monetary damages or things that were basically stolen from other users or from a company directly. So be really careful when you're reporting these things, and definitely keep the flashy demos to a level that you can legally handle, because I fear
Right.
that the researchers in this case are going to get a lot more attention than they were bargaining for.
Absolutely.
Or
Funky Monk
maybe
wants to know who's watching who's monitoring the monitors. I would ask then who's watching the Watchmen, and maybe
I
it's Dr. Manhattan. I don't know.
I feel like every time you get more free credit monitoring, they add a guy watching the guy. So there's like 12 people, and they're all watching for fraud or malfeasance on behalf of the guy in front of you. So we're creating a surveillance chain where we're just employing people to watch our credit monitors and make sure that they and the subsequent people in front of them are all doing it by the book. Feels
Or
nice
in
to
other
have a
words,
big crowd reaching out and making sure you're okay, right?
right. Or in other words, it's turtles all the way down. There's a joke or a reference that somebody might get.
I think that like if you're going to have this free credit monitoring stuff and you're so impacted by this, you should be able to like call all like one representative from that free credit monitoring to assemble at a place once per year to do something. You've got 15 rounds of free credit monitoring. You should just be able to summon those 15 credit monitors once per year to a location of your choosing and give them a task.
Sounds like a great reality show.
Yeah, no, everybody says trigger at once, but like at that point, you've been breached so many times that like you're just fighting data breaches all day and getting like phishing calls constantly. All right, so we have another report of a data breach. This one is information that is being sold on a hacking forum about AMD. This appears to be confidential information. Also, I believe it was like AMD credentials. Oh, yes. Well, that would be bad. But future AMD product specs, employee databases. Again, employees being impacted by one of these, customer databases, proprietary files, ROM, source code, and firmware and finances. So obviously that would be not very good for them. And we're waiting to see if there's going to be a disclosure report. We're waiting to see if this is old data. Sometimes we do see that these companies have data that was previously breached just kind of reorganized by threat actors and then released as new data. And that's where like have I been pwned is kind of like useful, because if it goes into have I been pwned and then like it's 100% overlap, we're like, okay, that was just constructed of old stuff. Other times LLMs are being used to take old data and then fill it in with stuff that looks plausible but isn't real. So if you think that cyber criminals are going to be completely honest about, you know, a data breach being like new or fresh or not padded with fake data, then, you know, they just want to make money. They don't care. All right. So we also have a report on the MetaBank cyber attack. This was, as it says in the headline, pretty scathing. It highlighted a lot of missed opportunities to stop this attack. And this company was not without defenses. I kind of expected to see like, oh, like there was no defenses here. It was just wide open. And no, they had actually made pretty substantial investments in making sure they had cybersecurity protections. However, all of the alerts that came up were apparently either not triaged properly or just flat out ignored until the data breach had already happened. So the lack of MFA and then the lack of attention to the alerts that were being generated by the software that they had actually installed and was doing its job was really the primary cause of this data breach. Obviously, like you kind of can't stop, like you can't stop unwanted access, but you can be alerted when stuff starts looking weird. And that's something that we do, you know, at Varonis. Like the first thing we look for is unusual access. And in this case, they found unusual access. Like they were able to actually identify that and early on be aware that something was going on. But because it wasn't properly triaged or they didn't understand the results that they were looking at, it caused the system, even though it was detecting the attack, to not be effective in stopping it. And that's obviously kind of scary for companies who might feel like they're completely covered, but might not either have any automatic remediation, like things don't automatically lock down when it's triggered, or they don't have someone who understands what they're looking at or can properly triage something that's happening really quickly.
Yeah, this one was interesting in, I'll call it the simplicity of it, because like you said, they had things in place, but it was all just sort of the dumbest things that happened, because it was an IT service company. The guy was logged into his personal browser and saved his work credentials there. Then he got hit with credential stealing malware, which the attackers just used to log in to servers that didn't have MFA. It was either credentials or a device token, I believe is what it was. And then they could log into the VPN and boom, they had access to whatever they wanted at that point. So it was just a series of, I'm going to say, basic configuration mistakes that just, you know, and some like operational security stuff, like logging in with your own personal browser. But it just, this is how it happens, though. And we see this in these big corporate breaches. We like to talk about, oh, it was cool and sexy and they used a 0-day. Well, it turns out most of the time it's like phishing or something dumb like this, stolen credentials in these big breaches.
And like it's, you know, it's interesting to see these after action reports and see like what actually went wrong. We were looking at the results of one against a major healthcare business as well, trying to see like what happened. And that ended up being like, you know, an employee downloading a malicious file and there being basically no protection. Like for, you know, okay, if one of your employees downloads a file and it explodes, like what's the blast radius, we like to ask. And in that case, it seemed like it was a bunch of hospitals. So that wasn't good. But in this case, yeah, it seems like the blast radius was pretty big, and that made it easy for the attacker to move, you know, throughout the system. And even though they were generating alerts and they were not being particularly stealthy, it did not hamper their ability to exfiltrate the data. All right, so next up, we have my favorite story of the week. I almost want to run the confetti again, honestly, on this one, because I have tried to cancel Adobe before, and I think this is completely justified. So if you have never tried to cancel an Adobe subscription before, well, let me tell you, it is crazy. They will fine you. It's designed to discourage you. There's like, it's like getting out of a carpool lane. There's only certain times when you're allowed to do it. And like, it can be costly if you do it the wrong way. Um, so yeah, like it has been pretty common knowledge that Adobe has made it not impossible, but incredibly discouraging and hard, and sometimes even expensive to cancel your subscription. Like they basically realized, you know, everybody had figured out how to pirate Adobe. It was causing a national security crisis because everybody was getting their computers backdoored by like installing it off of some sketchy torrent site. And they're like, okay, guys, you can pay a low price per month and just please stop. Just please stop. And everyone was like, okay, that sounds reasonable. That sounds fine, Adobe. We can make that deal with you. We'll stop backdooring our computers with malware if you agree to provide us the service at a reasonable fee, because theoretically we can cancel at a certain point and we're not on the hook for the ridiculous price that Adobe used to charge for like Photoshop. Like as a photographer, I hated the price point for Photoshop when it used to be a non-subscription service. So I actually really welcomed when they switched to that. And the kind of caveat to that was if you don't have like a student license or something, they are like very, very aggressive about cancellation. So this has finally been acknowledged by the government, which is kind of nice. And the complaint by the FTC said that they need to have a permanent injunction to stop ongoing violations, monetary civil penalties for the violations, equitable monetary relief, which means restitution. Hey, I might be getting a refund. That's actually great. Nice. Disgorgement of ill-gotten money. Sounds like they have to throw it up, but yeah, basically they have to pay back the ill-gotten money that they made by basically making it so atrocious of a process that like it's, you know, it's really, really hard to unsubscribe. It also had some language which indicated that customer content would be access to train AI or conduct security scans, which was crazy to me. So I saw a couple of things that people were objecting to. One of them was that, which nobody wants their stuff scraped and then turned into a product. Like that is, these companies are so hungry for data to train LLMs on at this point that it's like getting a little sketchy. And then also I saw people complaining about generated images using Adobe also being able to be claimed by them. So it's like, oh yeah, like buy our subscription thing, but anything that you generate from it is actually ours. That would significantly complicate the kind of landscape there and make it kind of like sketchy to use their stuff in you know, commercial products. That has also been rolled back, it looks like, but they've just been kind of like stepping all over this AI thing and also ending up in the news for I guess just making it really, really difficult to cancel. So super happy to see this one. Personally, my own personal opinion, because as somebody who's tried to cancel my Adobe subscription, it was never fun, and often like you would have to pay some sort of cancellation fee, which was again crazy to me.
James says that's why I use virtual cards. I just turn them off and that's it.
There you go. Yeah. All right, so we're actually at the end of the stream, but we've got a couple more stories we can breeze through. We've got 2 men pleading guilty for breaching a law enforcement portal and then selling the information / using it for blackmail. So imagine you figured out you could get access to a federal law enforcement database, and then you proceeded to use that information to blackmail people who were included in that database. I often talk about why I don't necessarily appreciate like mass surveillance, like automated license plate readers that is combined into these databases, searchable, and then given liberally access to like whoever wants it in the law enforcement community. In this case, it looked as though they posed as a foreign law enforcement officer and were able to get a police officer's credentials and access a restricted database containing sensitive records about suspects, enforcement actions, and intelligence reports. So this is obviously a national security problem, and it's also like a criminal problem where these people could potentially tip off criminals. They could expose that information. They could sell the information. But it seems in this case, they just use it to directly blackmail people. So pretty crazy case. The Department of Justice was releasing this yesterday. And I was just kind of stunned by the brazenness that these guys were able to access the database and then immediately use it to attempt to blackmail people. Kilian, any other thoughts on this?
It's awful, but in some ways I'm sort of glad they took the dumb criminal route, because like you said, this could have been so much worse. Like for the people getting blackmailed, it is awful and they obviously deserve justice, but can you imagine the amount of damage that could have happened if they would have released this, or like you said, tipped off larger criminal organizations, or all sorts of terrible things that you could do with this sort of information.
Yeah, no, it's definitely sorry, the next story is really funny, but it's definitely something that I feel like we've covered before, and we're probably going to end up covering again as these databases get bigger and bigger and get abused. We covered this before. Oh yeah, it was somebody. A police officer was abusing the system to spy on their ex-partners, and then got caught doing it. That's I was trying to remember like what
that's what it was.
Yeah, like so we've seen this abused twice in kind of like dumb criminal attacks, but looking at some of these data breaches being completely like either scraped or really sensitive information being sold directly to people who might benefit from that. Like I think that that's probably the next step in some of these law enforcement data breaches that we've seen already. All right, so moving on to the story that made me chuckle. This is, again, a case study in what not to do. So 2.5 years in prison for wiping 180 virtual servers. And literally all of this happened because the company who fired this guy forgot to rotate out his credentials or forgot to cancel his credentials after firing him. So he was mad about that and apparently Googled, how do I wipe virtual machines? Came up, like cobbled together a script and then deployed it and successfully made a wiper that destroyed 180 virtual servers, causing damages estimated to be $678,000. So, I mean, you know, there's not a lot of things that you can smash that would cost that much. But, you know, a bunch of virtual machines apparently add up to a lot. So, I mean, you know, just like you would expect this guy to go to prison for breaking the physical property that costs that much, this digital property was enough to get him arrested. And yeah, if you are going to go in and deploy a wiper against your old work, doing it from your own IP address is not necessarily a great idea, just as a note from this case study. So we often talk about insider threats and like what that means. And, you know, a small mistake like forgetting to cancel out someone's credentials that could be overlooked, or maybe there's a glitch and it doesn't happen. Forgetting to do that can be a really big deal. And this company learned that the hard way. There's definitely multiple instances of this happening in the past. And we've covered many of them where someone gets fired and they get pissed and they use their access to cause significant disruption. They don't even seem to care about getting caught most of the time. They're just so angry in the moment that they just do it out of rage and then end up, getting caught for it. So, for one, maybe don't do that. And for two, you know, if you're escorting someone out, if someone gets laid off, especially if they seem a little upset about it, then perhaps it's best to cancel out their credentials before letting them go home.
Yeah, there's in terms of the corporate world, we see offboarding gaps like this be a problem fairly frequently. You know, and a lot of times there's processes in place to offload them, or offboard them, but there's always something that gets missed. It almost in every case, they're using a different account for a test or something like that, or you know, maybe something just gets missed in the process, and then you have situations where you know maybe their account gets compromised somewhere else, and then this puts the business in scope, or not even just compromised, just general data theft later on. I have plenty of stories about, oh yeah, I left company X over here. Well, they never set off my access, so I go and look at their product plans and I give them to my new company. I mean, we hear it all the time in the cybersecurity world. Talking to customers, it's a legitimate and a big fear, and it's a big blind spot that organizations have.
Yeah, access control is crazy. Like I've seen major corporations like try to enforce access control very strictly and then just fail in such like funny ways. I'm like, am I not supposed to access this? Should I not be seeing this? Yeah. So, all right. So we've got two more stories. One of them is pretty short and sweet. We talked about the Panera Bread ransomware attack, and it looks like they may have paid. The reasons why it looks like that was the data was never released. And it looks like that also there was an internal email sent to employees where they're like, yeah, you know, we did our best to prevent this from being breached, like, but we can't guarantee it. So obviously, like, not having it immediately be breached is great, especially for the employees. However, as we said before, it's still pretty likely that sometime in the future, this data will be repackaged, sold, or otherwise like make its way onto the internet. Once it's out there, it's really hard to know what the threat actor is going to do with it. And if they decide to like close up shop and, you know, get rid of any loose ends, then they might decide to just sell this as a parting gift, because after they get paid, there's really very little incentive for them to not monetize that information however they can. So yeah, this is Not something we typically recommend to pay the ransom, but it's something that some companies decide to do. We'll have to keep an eye on this one and see exactly what the fallout is from actually going through the negotiations with the threat actors in this case. And finally, just wanted to call out some Kody malware from a threat group associated with Pakistan. This is a emoji-driven C2 server that isn't especially remarkable in anything other than its command structure. So you can use a man running to run a program. You can take a screenshot with the camera with flash emoji. You can, if you're pointing down, that downloads a file from the victim's device and uploads it to the command file. Pressing up uploads a file from the victim's device to from the attacker. The backend pointing is uploading it to Oshi, which is a remote style file storage service. The left pointing hand is going to transfer.sh, and then the fire is going to find and send all files matching predefined extension list that are present. So it's basically a general like big exfiltration, a fire sale, if you will. Yeah, and then we also have a Fox, which is to zip all Firefox profiles on the victim's device. And that's nice, like if there's any like, maybe like bookmarks or anything you want to access there. And then you can also use the skull to terminate the malware process using the os.exit. I just thought that this was adorable. And obviously, like looking for ways to obfuscate stuff or hide things or like, make legitimate looking traffic out of malicious traffic is constantly evolving. But the fact that they just used a bunch of cutie emojis is my favorite. And the fact that they also loosely correspond to the action that it's doing, I thought that was kind of clever. So whoever in Pakistan made this one, I think your malware is cute. That's all I have to say. All right, so that is all the time we have for this episode. Kilian, thank you for joining again. And it's going to be a while till I see you. It's going to be until I'm back from tour camp. So if any of you are going to tour camp, please let me know. I'm excited to see people there. We're going to be setting up all sorts of blinky lights and stuff, although it looks like it might be raining, so we might be a little bit wet. I will be traveling to and setting up a tour camp on Wednesday and Friday, so you won't see me next week, but you'll see me the week after. And then again, after that, man, like Black Hat is coming up, like not super soon, but kind of soon. And Kilian, are you going to Black Hat?
I am. I just literally booked my flight for it, I think yesterday or Wednesday. So officially locked in on the Black Hat.
Cool. Yeah, so we'll probably see more of you at Black Hat than we'll see on than I'll see on this like random island I'm heading to. But yeah, stay tuned. Not next week, but the week after, we'll be back online. And if you want to make sure we come back, you can always go to Varonis.com/Kody. It lets everyone at Varonis know that you appreciate the stream and they should keep sponsoring us to come on every week, twice a week, which is what we like to do. So I also will be working on my new Nullbyte episode this week. So if you have any suggestions on how I should emerge from like 3 years of silence, please put it in the comments. I am looking for suggestions. And I think there's a lot of ways we could go with that. So it should be a lot of fun. All right, everyone. Thank you for hanging out with us today. This is always the highlight of my week. Kilian, hanging out with you is also one of the highlights of my week. So we will see you all not next week, but the week after. And thanks for hanging out with us, everyone. Goodbye.
Take care.